you're cast into a fantastical world, a world of magic, monsters, and quests. The world is vast and varied. Icy palaces to rainbow bridges to treacherous swamps, an ever-changing landscape, an ever-changing game board, magic, monsters, giants, ogres, and treasure. Sounds like one hell of a game, doesn't it? How could they possibly get this wrong? Hi, I'm Luke and welcome to Down from the Attic. And this is Key to the Kingdom from Waddington's. Let's get this down and have a look at it. Key to the Kingdom was designed to be an entry-level dungeon crawler game for younger children. I believe the designer had played Hero Quest with his children, who found it much too complex to understand, and so created a simplified game around the same core themes. The box, well, Waddington's really went all out with this to make it look as exciting as possible. The art is fantastic and draws the player in really well. Evil warlords, valiant knights, dragons, demons, leprechauns? Okay. Contents, well, what can you say about this board? It's absolutely gorgeous to look at. Two pieces fit together jigsaw style to create the board as a whole, and it's absolutely chock full of details. The bloody skeleton in the swamp, the cyclops, the sea serpents, bloody daggers in the Temple of Martyrs. You can spend a good hour just letting your eyes wander over this and find new details. The cards similarly are wonderfully illustrated. The monster deck has a wide and varied range of foes to encounter during your travels. The insectoid witch, the flying werewolf, the putrid poltergeist, the gargantuan cockroach, all have their own fantastic art and descriptions. Descriptions that tell you how to defeat them, and more on that later. The art is a mix of fantasy and comedy, some of which is quite funny. Let's not forget this is a game for children. There's equipment cards and treasure cards too, all with fantastic cartoony quality to them. The play pieces are nicely sculpted. The heroes are all the same mould, but the mould is detailed. Swords, daggers, shields. The Black Demon King is similarly nicely sculpted and stands head and shoulders taller than the hero, so he stands out on the board. Setting up the game, the black portal discs are placed within the holes. Not sure why these are so important, but they decorate the board nicely. They do elevate and lift the board ever so slightly, and I think this is due in part to another small game mechanic that I'll demonstrate later. The two halves of the board are fitted together. Every player starts at the entrance to the kingdom, and every player is given one of each equipment card: an axe, a sword, fire, food, grappling hook, a net, rope, and a shield. The monster cards are shuffled and placed at the side of the board. Similarly, the treasure cards are shuffled face down, and the cards are fed into these treasure card holders. Each of these are assigned to a particular key location: the Banshee Tower, Ice Palace, Island Fortress. The treasures are effectively hidden and you don't know which is where. Players roll the dice to see who goes first, and the game begins. The objective of the game is to navigate the realm to reclaim the key to the kingdom. I know, go figure. And another piece of treasure, and make it safely back to the entrance with both. All the players have the same objective, and the winner is the person to make it out with the key and the treasure piece. One thing you'll immediately notice with the game is that there are many branching paths, and you're free to go whichever way you please. There's no set path. Dotted around the board are numbers. Rolling the 8-sided dice indicates your player's movement, but also the movement of the Black Demon King. He teleports around the board, and if he lands on you, or lands on one square either side of you, you're sent to the nearest dungeon. Situated around the board too are black and white daggers. When moving your playpiece, you must stop at them and go into the booklet to see what you need to do to progress, and you'll be doing this a lot. Let's see, swamp. Stop on the white dagger and immediately keep throwing the dice and moving accordingly until you reach the opposite dagger. However, if you land on a red stone, you must either have a grappling hook which you keep and keep throwing and moving to the end of the swamp. If you throw an even number and land on a red stone, you stay where you are until your turn ends. Or use your net, which you lose, and roll to move off the swamp without landing on another red stone. Each of these hazards have their own parameters to pass, usually all down to the luck of a dice roll, and consequences for failing. Players have the option of using their equipment to get out of the traps, but a lot of them you end up losing that equipment, and you'll need to weigh up whether or not it's worthwhile progressing without that item. Some of the hazards will send you down alternate paths for failing them. As a penalty, you'll take longer to get to the place you wanted to go to. You've made it to a dungeon. Time to battle a monster. You draw a monster card and you fight for the treasure it guards. Again, this equates to specific dice rolls. Roll 4 or higher 3 times, for example. Certain monsters you will absolutely need specific equipment, and if you've used it elsewhere on the game, you can't battle it, and you have to leave that key location, which frankly sucks. It really pranks the player who's struggled across the board to that key location for absolutely nothing. They'll have to waste another turn going back into the location to fight a different monster. Losing to a monster means you must leave that location and in some instances lose items. However, if you're successful in battling a monster, you get its treasure. Take the treasure card holder and secretly peep at the treasure. If you're lucky, you'll have the key to the kingdom. Keeping your treasures a secret is important because if you've got the key to the kingdom, then all the other players are going to be gunning for you. And if they land in the same space as you, they get to pick which treasure they want to take. So having a poker face about which treasures you've got is crucial. The game goes further to prank the players by making one of the 6 treasures a booby trap. That's right. If you collect this card, even if you've got the key to the kingdom and another piece of treasure, you can't leave the kingdom. You've got to navigate to the snake pit in order to get rid of this cobra. However, you might be lucky enough that one of your opponents lands in the same space as you, takes one of your treasures, and ends up with this instead. Let's get to the big sell of this game, the magic whirlpools. Any player can choose to jump into the whirlpool, and the other players will have 3 rolls each to either get to the other half of the game board or to reach the whirlpool too. After this, the board opens up and the game board gets much bigger. With both sides open, there's a lot of ground to cover and a lot of places to explore and to lose equipment. If you haven't been successful in getting to a safe point, your play piece is tipped off the board and placed in the hole. That player then has 3 turns to roll either a 1 or an 8, otherwise they lose all the treasures. All of them. Similarly, jumping into a whirlpool when the board is folded out causes it to fold in, crushing opponents if they aren't lucky. If you know that your opponent has the key to the kingdom and a treasure and a hightailing it to the entrance, you can be a real arsehole and hop in the whirlpool to thwart their efforts. Players may also use deep magic cards acquired from the Ring of Stones to prevent a board from folding out, but it doesn't stop it from folding inwards. You're pretty much down to the die roll and luck at that point. So, treasures are lost during the whirlpool transformations. Possibly the key to the kingdom. Game over, right? No. You don't get out of this game that easily. You can get treasures and your equipment back by crossing the Rainbow Bridge successfully, but you can only do this once in the game, and if you mess this up, you end up losing another piece of equipment. You can also visit the Ring of Stones as many times as you like to regain equipment cards and treasures, which kind of makes crossing the Rainbow Bridge pretty pointless. You navigate the hazards, the whirlpools, the monsters, the Black Demon King, and the most dangerous threats, your opponents, and successfully make it back to the entrance with the key and your treasure. You're declared Supreme Custodian and you win the game. So, my thoughts on this game aren't that great. I understand that it's an entry-level dungeon crawler and treasure hunting game for kids, but this game really hasn't aged that well. As I mentioned earlier, you can't move anywhere without constantly going back to the booklet to read up on the hazards. It gets incredibly tedious and repetitive, and they all amount to roughly the same thing. Roll the dice, roll this number, roll the dice, roll this number. It's dull to play, and it becomes a slog. Even the Evil Tower Bridge, that requires additional pieces that you use to build a bridge on the board, amounts to a simple look, throw and move mechanic. By the way, the bridge is the reason why the whirlpool pieces are present, and the folding board doesn't affect these pieces. That's a nice bit of design there, I'll give them that. I've found too, playing with adults, that this game can go on and on and on and on. With slide tactics and the board constantly folding and opening, treasures being lost, trips to the Rings of Stone to get the treasures again, board folds, lose treasure, go to the Ring of Stones, get treasure, board folds, lose treasure, go to the Ring of Stones, get treasure, board folds, lose treasure. It doesn't end. It never ever ends. Play with the wrong people and this becomes a miserably long game, to the point we've all looked at each other and gone, do you fancy playing something else? That's one of the worst things you can say about any game, where the players aren't engaged or interested or being challenged to the point they want to play something else. That's terrible board game design. The instruction manual is a complicated, unstructured mess, to the point that it's actually caused arguments, especially over the Rainbow Bridge and Ring of Stones. I've had people swear blind that you get all the treasures from visiting the Rainbow Bridge or the Ring of Stones, and that's all due to poor wording. The word treasure can apply to one single piece or a collective. Play with pedants and they'll prey on this. Navigating this manual to find rules and bits of information to play halts the game dead while you rifle through trying to find that key bit of info to move the game forward. It doesn't help that the board doesn't label hazards or doesn't have any sort of miniature guide on the board as to how to approach this hazard. You have to keep going back to the book, and it's boring. I've said before on previous reviews that nostalgia can play massively into how we view things from our childhood, and board games aren't exempt from that. The first board game that I ever remember playing was Ghost Castle, and I remember playing this with my dad and my cousin, and I must have been about 3 years old. I'm thinking probably 1988, something like that. Struggling to get up to drop the skull down the tower, and it looking absolutely enormous. And I've still got my copy, and I brought it out and realised just how small everything was. And that's the thing. I also remember Key to the Kingdom being a lot more fun, a lot more balanced and a lot more exciting. But I can't recommend this one. The times I've brought this out at board game nights, it's been met with an audible groan, and people are reluctant to play due to the constant flipping through the rulebook, slow chugging gameplay and repetitive mechanics. It's a simple roll and move game, and the battle and hazard navigation is almost always down to pure luck. It's a game that's marketed where your decisions really influence and shape the game, but when it's all controlled by a dice, it's all down to luck. Making use of item cards and when and where to use them hardly seems to hold the importance it should, because you can always simply replace them. It's a deeply flawed game that, despite the chances I've given it, has failed to entertain me in my adulthood as it did when I was a kid. I know this game holds a lot of memories for a lot of people, and there's a big nostalgia value to it, and it's pretty popular with retro board game collectors, but for me, I won't be playing this one again. But I would be interested to hear your thoughts and opinions on this one, whether you like the game, whether you don't like the game, whether you've house ruled it and improved it. Yeah, very interested to hear everybody's thoughts on this one. For now, I'm Luke, and as always, thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you again soon.